Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Skype for Business broadcast, where we're on every other Friday. Today's topic is around hybrid PSTN calling. So we want to talk to you about this topic, but before we do, we wanted to point you to two things. One is our Bing Pulse survey, where we want to learn a little bit of information about yourself. And the second thing is a live Q&A panel, which will be taking questions throughout this webcast. And so do put your questions in that live Q&A panel. So with that, why don't we get started with today's topic around hybrid PSTN. We'll do that with a short introduction of yourself, Bill. So just introduce yourself to the audience.
Sure. So I'm Bill Verthein. I've been an Office Communicator, Lync, and now Skype for Business, 3 different name changes, 1 product, for about 10 years. And I'm responsible for hybrid PSTN specifically, so I'm the product owner.
Okay, great. And so let's talk about a little bit about that. So what is hybrid cloud connector?
So hybrid cloud connector, well, I have some slides on that.
Oh.
So a lot of times people don't understand why Microsoft offers hybrid. A lot of people say, well, Microsoft offers their own PSTN offering, and why do you have hybrid? Well, there's a couple reasons. From the customer point of view, 80%, or the average enterprise PSTN contract is 5 years long. So that means that 80% of our prospective customers are in a contract that typically has penalty clauses and things like that, and it's required that they finish it. Some of our customers are in countries that don't have Microsoft PSTN. I believe it's over half of our Office 365 base, as an example. So the customer may not trust our PSTN yet. They're like, well, I don't know. You know, I've had AT&T for 10 years or British Telecom for 20 years or whatever. And that's okay, right? I mean, people kind of, we don't want to take people necessarily out of their comfort zone. We want them to take our products because they're comfortable with them. And if they're not comfortable with our PSTN, they can figure it out over time. They can change that. They may be in a market where we will never offer PSTN, and it's just too small. I mean, there are some countries that are just, from a scale point of view, not big enough, and you're not going to have economic reasons that we would be able to justify offering a native PSTN. And sadly, not every market in the world is an open PSTN market. Matter of fact, I mean, I like to joke. I said sometimes the PSTN is run by the cousin of the supreme leader, right? You're not going to get a license, right? It's just not going to happen, right? Yeah. And that is true in some places of the world. So the beautiful thing about hybrid PSTN is that, first of all, for us, it allows us to deploy and have our customers use Cloud PBX globally. There's no regulatory friction. We're not the carrier of record. We don't need a license. We don't sell the PSTN. We just simply allow you to use the PSTN you already have and hook that up to Cloud PBX. And it allows us to work with PSTN providers in certain markets rather than selling against them. So it gives us flexibility, and it gives our customers flexibility. That's ultimately what it does. So let's talk about Cloud Connector Edition, right? So there's 2 ways we offer hybrid to our customers. One is Cloud Connector Edition. And Cloud Connector Edition is a standalone device that sits on premise. It will typically sit within the DMZ, demilitarized. Well, I don't even know what they call it. There's a more politically correct name for it than DMZ. I keep forgetting what it is.
I actually think it's demilitarized zone for. Yeah.
Well, okay, fair enough. But it's between the outer firewall to the internet and the inner firewall to the enterprise. And there's an area that's where you typically put your mail servers and you put a bunch of stuff out there. And so you put Cloud Connector out there. And Cloud Connector consists of 4 virtual machines that are highly customized, that run custom versions of specific components of Skype for Business. And they're set up to do this hybrid connection between the Cloud PBX and the PSTN on-premise. What it does in the end is it enables users that are homed online, so your users that are in your enterprise are homed online, meaning that they have an account in Active Directory online, and that they're part of Office 365 online. And they will then be able to connect to either PSTN on-premise or a variety of other things. It's not strictly speaking limited to PSTN. So in some cases, you want to hook to legacy PBXs. As a matter of fact, in most cases, it's pretty rare that you walk into an account that's never had a telephone, right? So you're typically walking into an account that has something in place. So while you can take SIP trunks directly into Cloud PBX with Cloud Connector, more likely you're going to use the SIP trunk to an existing legacy PBX, like an old Cisco or especially an old Avaya, given their difficulties. Also, as I said, to get the PSTN connection, you can actually use E1s and T1s as well, which are the old school telco trunks, but you'll need a gateway. You need a telco gateway for that because Cloud Connector only speaks SIP. So however you get a SIP, we're good, but it has to be SIP. You can also do analog telephones, which is super important if you have like a factory situation. Factories tend to have like a lot of analog phone lines. Even within Microsoft here, we're in Building 30 here. Even within Building 30, there's probably half a dozen analog phones. There's actually an analog phone by the receptionist, right, which is always there, right, for emergencies, right. It's a standalone phone. There's various fire phones and elevator phones and emergency phones in the parking lot and stuff like that. So even in our own Skype for Business building, there are analog phones kind of hiding in various odd places. So we're able to handle analog phones, and those things get aggregated through third-party analog terminal adapters from folks like Sonos and Audio Codes that send a SIP. So again, it's a SIP source. And then there's special function devices like, if you got a custom voicemail or a specific call center thing, all those things tend to have SIP interfaces. So again, we can hook to those things with the proper dial plan set up and stuff like that and proper routing rules. We can route to all these things actually in parallel, depending on what you have. And finally, we also offer Cloud Connector in two ways, right? So one way we offer it is you can go to a Lync and you can download it and you can put it on your hardware. And at the end of the presentation, we'll give you all those links that'll tell you where to go to get it. And there'll be links there that describe the hardware you specifically need to have. So that's one way to do it. You get the hardware, you buy the hardware, you buy your own server, you have to provide your own server license, and then you download Cloud Connector. Cloud Connector itself is free. There's no charge for Cloud Connector. The operating system license, we're not actually even able to give a discount on it. Just we're required to charge the normal price for that, and then you pay your per user Cloud PBX license, however you get it, which is either E5 or an E3 plus Cloud PBX add-on. I believe those are the only two. Maybe you guys have invented a third one, but those are the two that I remember. And so that's what you pay for it. But the end result is the actual Cloud Connector software. There's no charge. You can also get Cloud Connector pre-deployed on appliances. We have two approved appliances, or two approved appliance vendors, each of which have two appliances. That would be Audio Codes and Sonos. Those appliances are not only a prepackaged Cloud Connector edition, but they also have an SBC built into it as well, from each of the vendors. And you're going to be able then to do the things that SBCs do, normal kind of magic, fix-up, translation, stuff like that. So a lot of people go for the appliances, but some other people like to roll their sleeves up and make their own device. So whatever you do, it works, and we're okay with that. And we actually, on the appliances, I want to be clear, with those two vendors, we actually test our stuff with their stuff, and they test their stuff with our stuff. And so we can actually speak with some certainty that these products work the way we intend them to from those two vendors. And I did say that they had two appliances each. There's like a big one that'll do like 500 calls per box. And I don't know the price on it. You'd have to go to their website and figure that out. But there's a 500 call system. And then there's I believe it's 50 to 100. It depends. I'd have to look. I believe theirs are 100. And this is 100. These are simultaneous calls. These aren't users, right? So like 500 users, I mean, within Microsoft, we actually put 20 users per phone line because we never call each other. I mean, Oliver and I could be sitting next to each other. We wouldn't even talk. We'd IM or email each other, even if we were 5 feet away in the same room.
We never
right?
talk to each other.
So anyways, the point is that Microsoft, as an example, has a very low call load, right? So we could put 20 users on a single line. If you're like a call center, or if you're like something that your business is primarily on the phone and you're calling people and stuff like this, you may have 5 or 6 users per line. So if you get a 500 line system, you go anywhere from 2,500 to gosh knows what, right? It all depends on your specific load. So one other thing I'll mention here, and anyone who's seen me give talks, and I've given talks at a variety of industry events and Microsoft events and stuff like that, like our Ignite conference and stuff like that. I always kind of get on this soapbox, and I think it's important to get on here because we're talking about like what CCE is. You have to view CCE as a direct extension of our cloud. So essentially, this is not just some PBX that you deploy and you kind of forget about it. This is part of our service, and half of the service is running in the cloud and cloud servers, and the other half of the service is running inside the CCE. And because of that, it's not standalone. So for us to provide a quality end-to-end service, we have to be able to update that box pretty much on our time frame, because there are components and interfaces in the cloud that the on-prem components are talking to. And we update our cloud all the time. I mean, we can update it as frequently globally, a global update, and as frequently as 24 to 48 hours, or more typically the big updates, like if we were going to update like the mediation server or something like that. Those tend to take a week or 2 weeks because we kind of roll through it on a more cautious, I would say, pace. But certain things that we can update very fast, and like I said, we update 24 to 48 hours globally. So if we're going to update something in the cloud, we need to know the cloud connector is going to work. So we are going to test cloud modifications against cloud connector, right, before we push them. And if there's any issues, we may need to modify the cloud connector. So we would actually push an update of the cloud connector first, and then update the cloud. So it just kind of proves that this is not like your typical like server where you turn it on and wait till the fan seizes before you even look at it, right? Because this box is definitely something that is really part of the cloud. So one of the things that we put in there is we put in what we call auto update, right? And what auto update allows us to do is that the cloud connector will actually update itself, right? It needs port 80 access to the outer firewall. It needs ability to actually go to a specific location in the web where we post updates. And it will go on a certain cadence, I think it's once or twice a day, and it'll look for updates. Now, the IT admin has the flexibility of being able to set the update window, right? So the update window can be defined as, between certain hours. It can also be certain days of the week. It's very common that people do this on the weekends, but I mean, some businesses are actually open on the weekends. So there's flexibility. You can define your update windows however, but when the update is found and the update window is open, it will download both operating system updates for the server, as well as download updates for Cloud Connector components. And then what it'll do is in the background, while the Cloud Connector is still running, it will build duplicate virtual machines, in parallel. So while you're taking calls and calls are flowing, we're building the next version. And when the next version is ready, we then put the actual Cloud Connector into maintenance mode, and it'll drain users, and your high availability pool will then soak up the new users as they come in. And then when we actually get to 0 users, we stop the old VMs, we start the new VMs, we rehook them up to the virtual network switches, and start it back up again. And it literally comes back online within probably, I would say, 30 seconds, right? It's pretty quick. But you do have to drain the user, so it takes some time for that to happen. But the point is, this happens automatically, right? And we test this upgrade. And we test it basically to only n-2, and technically we should only test it to n-1. And what that means is we test it from the prior version, right? You should never be upgrading from 4, 5, 6 versions earlier, because you're supposed to be auto-upgrading. This is part of the service, as I said earlier, and it needs to be kept up to date. Now, there are some companies that basically have a policy that they're just not allowed to run auto-update. Totally get that. So what you can do is you can actually disable auto-update. Generally a bad idea, But if you do disable it, then you have to have the discipline to go in once a month and look and manually do the updates. Because I guarantee you, if you do not update this device, some Monday morning you're going to come into work and your phone system's going to be down, right? Because you haven't updated it for 2 years or 3 years, and eventually there was a cloud update that changed things just enough where it didn't work, right? So it's kind of my warning, it's my soapbox. I spend a fair bit of time on this, but it's different because normally IT guys see these boxes as theirs, and if it works and I'm okay with the bugs or the features as they are, I'm not going to touch it. Well, this thing, you can't do that because it really isn't all here. Part of it is off in the cloud. It's in some data center, right? And so we need to make sure these things stay in sync. So that's kind of...
Okay, cool. And Bill, there's actually been a few questions that have come up, and so we're going to address some of those right now. The first one actually is the audience actually helped us with the DMZ. They say, someone in the audience said it's the perimeter network, and so we learned something here today.
You know, I recall now they say that that's true because I mean, DMC is like highly politicized and sometimes sensitive, but in the old, trust me, I've been in networking for a long time. It always used to be called the DMC.
Yeah. Okay, and then the actual first question that came in, and by the way, folks, if you guys have continuing questions, feel free to use the Q&A panel, and we'll get to them as we get to them. So that first question that came in is that CCE requires on-prem hardware, and so they were asking if there was a hosted version planned anytime in the future, and just kind of any understanding around that specific topic.
Well, hosting is one phrase that kind of means a lot of things. So there is a version of hosting which actually works, which is typically called like private network or private cloud. And essentially what that is that there's a provider offers basically a physical CCE that sits somewhere that they will manage on your behalf and that they VPN back into your enterprise, right? And so in that case, that's okay. But CCE itself is a fairly intricate set of virtual machines and scripts and update and blah, blah, blah. And it isn't designed to be multi-tenantized, and it isn't designed to be hooked into proprietary provisioning or monitoring systems. And as I explained earlier, when we do an auto update, we take it down to the metal and we rebuild everything from scratch. So even if you went in there and modified something, next update, boom, it's all gone, right? And so there are some people who are claiming that they have hosted CCE, and you should just make sure you check and see if it's a private cloud. I would say generally it's okay, but you should look into what they're doing. And if it's a regular like one box per one CCE, great. But if it's like, you know, I've got 5 CCE instances in some Azure stack or whatever, the scripts we wrote and stuff like that won't work. And even if they modify them, the next update, what happens, right? Because my update's going to push a new set of scripts, and those set of scripts are going to be made for the traditional hardware. So the kind of long meandering answer is here, private cloud is okay, and the other stuff we can't stand behind.
Okay, and the other question that came in was actually around your licensing point that you made, and they were just kind of asking about Windows Server 2016, that unlike 2012 where everyone might need a CAL, do you have any kind of comments around?
Well, so first of all, there's no need for a CAL for us, but you do need Data Center Edition, which is fairly pricey. The reason you need Data Center Edition is that we have so many VMs around that there's some there's some licensing problems when you use Standard Edition. I mean, it won't work forever. It'll work for a little while, and then there's some they track the number of times the licenses are used when you generate VMs, and so this can cause problems down the road. Data Center Edition doesn't have a limit, so we can create as many VMs and update it as much as we want. So currently we require Data Center Edition. We do not require a per user CAL. We just require that the proper number of cores, I think it is how you guys license server. Is there, and that's all we need. So it's not a per user. As a matter of fact, CCE is stateless. It has no concept of users, right? So users go through CCE, but the user context is in the cloud. So there's no account for the users on the server. They don't log into the server, they log into the cloud.
Mm-hmm.
So the thing that's on premise is just kind of a translation and kind of redirection and proxy, if you will, for the cloud.
Okay, so yeah, that's super helpful. Why don't we continue with just kind of understanding the different hybrid voice options and the different architectures and flows.
Sure. So sometimes this gets dense and stuff like this. So I'm gonna try and make it obvious. I'm gonna use my little mouse here and try and point. All right. So this is a kind of typical cloud connector. And it says perimeter network on my slides. See, I wasn't even paying attention to my own slides. Thankfully, somebody did the slide that illustration for me. So this here in the where my mouse is. My mouse is gone. There we go. I don't know why my mouse went away. So this here is my the CCE, right? And you see in the CCE, there's a mediation server, there's an edge. There's CMS is the storage component, and then there's a domain controller and an AD within the CCE, but it's only for the VMs within the CCE, right? So it doesn't have anything to do with your network or your enterprise domain or anything like that. It doesn't have the users or anything. It's just so that the different VMs can trust each other and authenticate with each other, right? So it's like a little bubble, and it doesn't connect at all outside of the actual physical machine. So anyways, this is the CCE itself, and it's, you got your outer firewall and your inner firewall. Now, as far as like a user, like we'll talk about Dave here at the kind of center bottom, all normal traffic goes directly to the cloud. Doesn't even touch the CCE. So like IM and presence, conferencing, like if you got a audio video conference, like a meeting, a normal like online Skype for Business meeting would be in the cloud, and would go directly to the cloud because we don't have an audio video mixing unit. We don't have an AV MCU in here. So all that stuff goes up to the cloud. All the data sharing traffic, when you share screens and stuff like that, the data MCU, that also goes up to the cloud. There are peer-to-peer calls. So if Oliver and I were on the same network, and we called each other, the signaling would go up to the cloud, but when the actual call came up, our devices would talk directly to each other. So again, that stuff doesn't go to the cloud, but everything else does, right? But if there is a peer-to-peer call and somebody is outside the enterprise, meaning you're working from home, you're sitting in a Starbucks, whatever, and Oliver calls me and I am in the enterprise, if just one of the legs of the call is outside, then clearly that call traffic goes to the cloud. Right, it has to, right? But traffic that does stay on the CCE is all calls from within the enterprise that go to the PSTN, as well as calls from outside the enterprise that need to go to external PSTN. So if you're at your home office, right, and you need to call somebody, that traffic will route through and actually come through the cloud connector and go through the edge and the mediation server, and it'll then hit the PSTN gateway, right? And then it'll go out and you'll make your normal call. And again, if Oliver and I, or in this case John and Dave, were in their enterprise, that media traffic would again stay within the enterprise, right? So I'm going to briefly point out something I kind of added at the last minute here, so I hope I didn't break the slide when I added it. But we're in the process right now of adding media bypass to Cloud Connector. What media bypass means is that instead of the media from let's say Oliver's Skype for Business client and to phone call, normally it would go through the mediation server on the CCE, and it would go to the gateway, right? And so it's kind of this reflection or redirection of the media stream, and it goes through the inside firewall because of that. If you have media bypass set up, what happens is that the mediation server basically tells Oliver, in this case, or Dave in the diagram, that your client should go here, and then you negotiate your SIP connection directly to the PSTN gateway, which is this kind of dotted line, or media bypass equals yes. And in that case, all your media stays inside the firewall. It also means that your CC can likely scale higher because you're doing significantly less traffic. Like almost all your internal traffic is going to be going directly to the gateways, and your mediation server and the CC will not have to carry that traffic. So again, it kind of gives you some better capacity. So we're in the process right now, we're in TAP, our Technology Adoption Program. We're in the process of finalizing that release. You can expect it by the end of June. That's kind of our rough timeline. I always say summer, but it looks like end of June right now, and the TAP is good. We've got 20 people running it right now, and we don't have any real bugs yet. We actually have some configuration questions and documentation things we need to fix, but it appears that the actual media bypass release works fine.
Yeah, and actually lots of questions came up during our broadcast on when will this be available, so you answered that question preemptively.
June 30th. So, well, it's approximately June 30th. I mean, we're coming up 4th of July weekend in the United States. There are things that move around sometimes, but it's approximately then. It's not going to be December. Let's just put it this way. If it's December, I'm deeply in trouble.
Yeah.
So,
so it'll come out much sooner.
Any other questions?
Yeah, there's quite a few questions, which is, how do I migrate from a hybrid Skype for Biz on-premise to CCE was a question.
Okay. Well, so first of all, I didn't talk about the other way we do hybrid. Now, this has all been kind of like CCE. The other way we do hybrid is if you have a on-prem topology. See, I got the slide here. Yeah, I'm actually prepared. If you have an on-premise topology, you can use the PSTN assets and the mediation server and all this the roles that are normally part of even a standard edition Skype for Business on-premise topology, and you can use those to provide PSTN access to users that are homed in the cloud. So you can actually, even if you have an on-premise topology, you can home some of your users in the cloud, and they can use those same PSTN assets that are currently hooked up to the existing Skype for Business deployment you have. And those users can talk to each other, and they act as one domain, but essentially you're able to use the cloud to kind of scale out the deployment you have. It's also a good way to kind of put your toe in the water relative to hybrid and kind of see how it works. You don't have to really do anything that you don't already have. You just got to configure some stuff, and we have documentation on how to do all that, right? And so in this case, you know, it's similar in that, like, the all other traffic stuff is very much the same as far as if you're especially if you're a hybrid user, if you're an online user, if you're homed online. If you're homed online, what you're going to see is that all your IM and presence traffic, conference traffic, data sharing traffic, all the stuff that CC did, that would go to the cloud if you're homed online. But if you're homed on-prem, if you're an on-prem user, all that goes to your existing Skype for Business topology, right? So it works like it always did. But the cool thing is that you're able to add users and essentially borrow capacity from our servers in the cloud, and then it still all acts together as one topology, right? So that's one thing we can do. So that's kind of there's a word for it, and they call it split domain, but again, like hybrid, split domain is like one of these words that's like highly overloaded. Mm-hmm. Internally, and you'll hear me say it, and I'm going to slip into it, so I'm going to explain it. We call it OPCH, or on-prem configured hybrid.
That's a mouthful.
Yeah, well, OPCH is not a mouthful, right? No. So that's why you notice we're big on acronyms in engineering, right? We got CCE, we got OPCH. It's too much to kind of say these things every time, let alone type them, right? Every time you have to refer to them. So in this case, this particular diagram would be an OPCH topology, right? So that's one way to do it. Now, there's some people that I believe what the question is really asking is about coexistence, right? This is like the general term we have, where you can put a CCE next to an existing topology. Now, it turns out, you know, when we originally did this, we thought OPCH would be perfect if you had an existing Skype deployment, right? But there were some people that didn't want to touch it. They're basically like, this thing works, I don't want to touch it. And not only that, eventually I want to get rid of it. So the last thing I want to do is kind of like weld it further into my workflow. I want to go completely to the cloud. I want to shut these servers on-prem down. I don't want to like make them required for longer. This is something that, you know, for cost and other reasons, I want to move to the cloud. So what we've done now, and we're in the process of releasing, and I'll get to the dates because I'm sure they're going to ask me the dates. We have something we call coexistence. And coexistence allows a CCE to sit in parallel to an on-prem topology. Now, the reason this is hard is because the way the Skype for Business clients work is that there's only like one like system controller on the network. There's like a broadcast you do, it comes down, you know, your DHCP comes down, it's got some embedded name of the SIP address of the or the server name for Skype for Business and all this stuff. So there's always like one known place that all the clients go. The problem with coexistence is you have two, right? You have the CCE, which is acting on behalf of the cloud, so it thinks it knows everything, and then your on-prem deployment thinks it knows everything. So we had to find a way so that the clients would talk to one thing, but then be able to get to both systems. So we're in the process of working through that right now. We've actually, this week, we've just started engineering testing. We've got a build. We've been actually private testing it in the developers area for some time. So we believe it works. We're now testing it in engineering. In a week or two, we're going to take it to our end-to-end test, which has a kind of elaborate setup of various different types of topologies and network setups, and we also kind of do a regression test where we go through every obscure calling thing that happens. You know, one guy's outside, one woman's inside. You know, all these different things in the outside and inside switch. You have to do all these permutations. It actually takes weeks, actually, even in a highly automated test rig, to kind of go through everything, which is what we need to do before we release something. So coexistence will come, I say fall.
Yeah.
Right. Is kind of the guidance I give people. We, like I said, it's not fiction. It's not like I don't have to go hire the guy who's going to code it. Like sometimes people give dates and they don't even have people assigned. We've actually got a build, and we're actually testing the build in engineering. So and the build appears to work. And actually, we had our best guy work on this from a programming standpoint because there's some subtlety to getting this stuff working. So given the person and given how early we've got this thing, I'm pretty confident that we'll be able to get this to work and we'll get it on time this fall. Okay. And that should be fairly popular, actually.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear actually lots of questions have come in on that specific topic. So that's so you preempted it. So that's really good. But yeah, as a marketing guy, I always have to say, fall, and then we'll kind of see how as we get closer.
Yeah, I mean, we have a date, but I mean, I could give you the date, but a date that's that far ahead is just inherently not going to be accurate at this point. Okay. But one thing I can say, so since people are asking questions, and we've got time, the requirements for coexistence are this. You either have to have Skype for Business 2015, and you have to deploy CU6 on your Federation Edge, right? Your Federation Edge. The other edges you can choose whether to deploy CU6 or not, but CU6 will contain this magic sauce that allows, on the Federation Edge, that allows CCE to coexist with your on-prem deployment, right? If you are using Lync 2013, you will also need to deploy a 2015 CU6 Federation Edge, but only the Federation Edge. You can leave all your other edges and all your other servers 2013. And a 2015 Edge is an approved topology to hook up to Lync 2013. So this isn't like voodoo stuff. This has always been an approved topology since Skype for Business 2015 released. And in this case, you just need to deploy the one or perhaps several, depending on how your Federation Edge is configured. But all your Federation Edge servers need to be running CU6 Skype for Business 2015 Edge. Okay. And if you have that, both Skype for Business 2015 can coexist and Lync 2013 can coexist. There is no coexistence for Lync 2010 or earlier. Got it. Yeah. There's just too many changes, to be honest with you, I mean, think about it. It's what, 16, 17 years, right? Right. I mean, 6 or 7 years, since that came out, right? Yep. There's been a lot of significant changes to the system, and there's just no way to make that system do it. Yeah, well, so far, only the customers who have been asking have only asked back to 2013. Good. So yeah, I haven't seen any questions. We're good. So you are going to have to deploy a 2015 Federation Edge with CU6. Yeah. Okay, and to that point, it looks like there are a few customers on why don't we go through some specific kind of architectural or reference topology? Topologies of what customers have actually already done. And I got a couple, and these are by no means the only ones. As a matter of fact, the wonderful thing about this job is that there's never-ending amount of complexity here, right? And so it's great for employment because there's always something to do or fix or something to do. So we have here, this is a fairly, there's a couple ways we do this, right? So we could do what we call centralized PSTN trunks. This is normally where, and I know some customers, I won't mention them, but I was at an automobile manufacturer that we would all know and love, and I was in Auburn Hills, Michigan, visiting them. That's where their headquarters, at least for their IT staff, was. And all their dealers around the United States and Canada, all the calls they made came back to Auburn Hills and went through an on-premise Skype for Business deployment they had, and they centralized it. Now, in the case of the United States, that tends to make sense because long distance doesn't really cost more anymore, not like it did when I was a kid. So there's some benefit to like centralizing your trunks and being able to manage it and track it and all that stuff. And so, so in that case, that's like a centralized PSTN deployment. Other times, what people have is they want to centralize the logic, but they want to distribute the PSTN. And this is very popular in Europe. We call this a centralized CCE in the case of CCE, because what they'll do is they'll typically have 2 data centers, for redundancy and stuff like that. Let's say London and Amsterdam, and they'll have a bunch of CCEs, and they'll be deployed in high availability, so they'll have N+1 or N+2 CCEs, parallel pools. And then the CCEs are in the central location, but in each country in Europe, they have a different PSTN gateway, because calling from Germany to Luxembourg is an international call, and it's super expensive, right? So if it's the Luxembourg user who's making a call, you want them to go to the PSTN in Luxembourg, right? And so, so what we're able to do in a centralized CC topology is we're able to, based on the destination phone number or the origin phone number, depending how you've configured it, you can specify which PSTN gateway you go to. So in that case, your PSTN is distributed in all these relatively small offices sometimes. Like the German office might be big, but Luxembourg may be small and stuff like this. All those separate countries would have different PSTN gateways and trunks, but the CCEs would be managed as a pool. So the signaling would go up to the to the main data center, and then the user client would be told in media bypass mode, don't send your media all the way to Amsterdam and back. It'll go right from the user to their gateway, right? Which hopefully is within the same city or country, certainly. Right. So that's the difference here. So if you look at this, you'll see the top one on the left here. This top deployment via Cloud Connector. This is a centralized, a consolidated SIP kind of topology. And in this case, both the signaling and the media, all, even for the PSTN stuff, all goes to the central site, right? In the case of the bottom here, this is more the central CCE topology that I talked about, where each local office has its own PSTN breakout, and you configure the routing and stuff like that to direct the users to go to their local PSTN source. Similarly, you can do the same thing in OPCH when you're doing Skype for Business using the online topology and setting it up to provide hybrid. But in that case, this and I keep wanting to say the automaker's name, and I'm trying not to. This automaker had this particular deployment, right? Because they had a Skype for Business on-prem topology, and they had centralized trunks, right? And so they were going to go, when they did hybrid, they were going to start with the OPCH. They were going to start like taking 20 or 30 users and putting them in the cloud, but they're still using that same set of servers and trunks that they had in Auburn Hills, Michigan, right? So that is the centralized one on top. In the case, you can configure local PSTN breakout even with an on-prem topology. The same kind of routing rules and dial plan stuff that is in CCE and in Cloud PBX is obviously available in on-prem, so you're able to configure that the same way. So you can technically use local PSTN breakout and do media bypass and all this stuff, even if you have an on-prem topology and even if you're using OPCH hybrid with that on-prem topology. So these are kind of 4 different ways that you can offer it.
Yeah. Okay. So thanks for running through all that. And I think just in the interest of time, we actually have quite a few questions that have come in. So I'll see how.
Well, I think that what's next is important because I think probably some of the questions are about what's next.
Okay.
So I want to make sure I cover that because that will hopefully preempt preempt some of the questions.
Some of the questions, okay.
So in the next 6-ish months, right? So this is, like I said, there's once I get beyond the second release, it becomes somewhat vague. But we have media bypass coming this summer, as I talked about, hopefully end of June. Like I said, it's already in tap today. We're going to have coexistence in the fall, so I have that. We're also going to be doing improved diagnostics and reporting. If it's not in the fall release, it'll come right after that, right? So these are somewhat independent things. So because we can do auto update and this stuff, we don't necessarily hold things up if they're unrelated in this case. And then in the midterm, and by midterm I mean like 2 years or so, we're right now going through just a kind of complete like reevaluation of the CCE topology and architecture, and just trying to find ways to reduce the hardware and software costs. Like, we get it, people aren't super happy with data center edition, so we're working on that. We're working on ways to minimize the hardware footprint to kind of reduce the cost. So all these things are kind of, are I would say, happening in approximately the 2-year time frame. So I don't really have details right now. Well, I have ideas, but we're not really ready to talk about them because we don't know if we can do what we want to do, at least in the way we want to do it. So this is what's coming in the next 6 months. The media bypass summer, coexistence fall, and then fall or winter for the approved diagnostics, and then 2-year time frame. We're going to try and take the hardware and software costs as low as possible.
Okay, got it. So why don't we let's flash up the slide on where we get more information.
And I can just leave this up, and then people can.
And then as we answer some of the questions, we can just leave this.
Yeah, well, and I can actually point to some of the information
Yeah.
on where the questions might be answered.
Okay. And do you want to say anything high level from this list of links that you provided?
Well, most of them are in TechNet. Some of them are in SOF, which is Skype Operations Framework.
Okay.
Which, if you're not familiar with SOF, you should go take a look at it. Right? Sorry. So you should go take a look at SOF. And SOF is where we have this training and documentation, and it's all organized, and our partners insert stuff, and it's more than just a website with a bunch of links. It is almost like a curriculum or a degree in Skype for Business, if you will. And so if you go up there, and that's the second link here, you'll see that is where you can kind of go to the academy and start learning about Skype for Business and CCE and OPCH. That's a great way to get training.
Great place to go.
Yeah. We do have just the general Cloud PBX planning document that describes when you use our PSTN and when you use hybrid. And, I forgot to mention this. If you're using our hybrid PSTN with Cloud CCE, you can also use our PSTN in parallel. So if Oliver and I were in the same enterprise and I was on Cloud Connector and I was using, let's say, Lync, which is our local carrier here in Seattle, that would be my local PSTN for CCE. You could be just home directly to Cloud PBX and use the Microsoft telephony. We could still call each other. We're still managed in the same tenant, and there's no, it's completely transparent. It doesn't matter if some of your users use our offer in the countries that have it, and some of the users use their local telephony. It's transparent, so that's kind of cool. All right, so that kind of stuff is discussed in the first link there, which is Cloud PBX planning. The next stuff is specifically a bunch of documents on CCE hybrid. We have the download link here, which I gave, right, which kind of is where you go to download the CCE bits. There's a planning document, which kind of tells you the things you need to worry about and the data you need to kind of gather before you start it. And then there's a configuration and deployment document. Likewise, OPCH or split domain hybrid, there's a similar planning and config and deployment guide, so that's great. We also have our team blog where I or Carolyn Blanding, who's one of our team members here, she tends to write a lot of articles up there, where they go through more of a narrative and kind of descriptive reason why things are done and things to watch out for. So that's a good place to go, just the hybrid team blog. I also have included links, and I don't know that these links will always be accurate because it's a third-party website, but these are the links to audio codes and Sonos appliances. So go talk to those folks about them. we work with them very closely.
Yep.
So this is our whole kind of like data dump, and I'll leave this up, and we can talk about questions, and I can refer to specific documents here that might help.
Okay, great. And we are unfortunately out of time, and I see that there's actually a ton of questions.
I thought we had till
that have
10.
We end at 45, right? So
I would have talked faster.
you would talk faster? Okay.
Yeah.
But we certainly have quite a bit of questions that have come in.
We'll
so
take one or two.
You want to take one or two?
Yeah.
All right,
I got nothing to do.
All right, we got nothing to do
This
here.
is like Memorial Day, so you're just standing between me and my weekend.
There's
right?
a little bit of bonus time. So why don't
That's
we answer? Maybe let's take two.
Okay.
And then answer them as fast as possible, and then we'll kind of get moving forward. So one of the questions that was asked is, can one CCE box support multiple SIP trunks?
Yes, you could support. It's a standard mediation server, so I forget the limit, but whatever the standard mediation server limit is, it's a lot, right? I mean, it's over a dozen, right?
Okay.
And typically what we recommend is that you cross-connect all your CCs to all your SIP trunks so that you get redundancy. So if a particular CC or SIP trunk goes down, there's some flexibility.
Okay. Will auto updates update my host? Was the question?
If it has to, yes.
Okay.
But obviously, we update all the OSs, including the host and the guest OSs. And in that case, we would have to reboot the whole box.
Okay. And so we've gotten those two questions. I think what we're going to do now is we're going to compile every single Q&A that has come in, and then we're going to post the answer on Tech Communities. So you guys go Bing or Google Tech Communities with Skype, and we will have a follow-up post with all the questions and our direct answers to those questions, and that's a commitment for.
So I got like weeks of work in front of me.
It won't be weeks. Probably maybe 3 days. Maybe 3 days. There's only 50 questions, right? And so I do want to thank all of you guys for joining, and thank you for the engagement throughout this entire session. We will see you here in 2 weeks. It'll be a different person, and the topic will be Polycom. And so look for that future webcast, and thank you guys all for joining us, and we will see you next time.